And we're live. Welcome everybody to FakeWhale Live. Today we have Operator with us, which as anybody watching right now can see, it's a duo, not just one person, but if you're listening. And just to start this off, I would like to hear, I guess, in your own words, just like, because you are so multifaceted, I'm wondering if you have some sort of a condensed version that you give people if they're like, so like, what is it you guys do or whatever, like, just in your own words, explain what Operator is, just kind of like in essence.
So Operator is Anya and I's collaborative practice, bringing together creative technology, immersive environments, and performance art into immersive and experiential performance installations. And I would say the native sort of medium is very much experiential, but the output is generally unrecognizable each time.
That's the simple version.
Yeah, and Anya's
background.
You can believe it. And Anya's background, if you want to.
Yeah,
I think it helps.
Choreography.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, that was great, but then like let's break it down a little bit. Like this is a duo, two of you. Maybe explain who each of you are individually, what your relation is to one another, for the people that aren't aware, and how that relates to your practice.
Yeah. So my background, I grew up dancing, so classically trained. All the styles you can imagine. Then that turned into wanting to get more into choreographing, creating my own works, usually focused on, centered on, and using the human body as a medium, which led to performance art, directing films, all things related to really the body, site-specific performance. And that was really what I was focused on when I met Deja.
And my background is in multimedia and human-computer interaction. So thinking about how to bring many mediums and touch points together into a singular experience. I think a lot about how the interface of technology and humans, and specifically how that operates in an immersive artwork. And then when Anya and I got together, it was originally to work, but then we started dating, and then we got married. But then we also started working together pretty soon as well.
Breeze right through that.
You're right. Got right to it. But we kind of got the obvious collaboration out of the way, which was me projection mapping and Anya performing, like kind of got it out of our system. And
that was the first.
Like that you say that.
You can look it up. It's called Line Scanner. It's about a minute long film where we had a projector rigged like, I don't know, 50 feet, in a sound studio, and facing down. Anya was, underneath performing like flat on the floor, and so the projection was interacting with her movements. Both were improvised, and then it was like edited together into a short film with music by Albonoto. And so that was like our first touch point. We're like, okay, we got that out of our system. Now let's hide all the technology. Let's make this human centric.
Let's get physical.
Let's get, and also, really that's where we started bringing the audience as the performer to the central of our practice, where and the audience as participants. So most of our works, as you've seen a few of them, really the audience, not just the body, but the audience specifically has to participate with the artwork in order for it to be complete or even work at all. It's almost as if the work doesn't exist without them.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting thing that you bring up, because like there's one thing that I wanted to speak with you guys about in particular, but you brought up getting the projection mapping thing out of the way, which I find funny because I totally understand that need where it's like, okay, like it's just so glaring, let's just do that thing so it's satisfied. It's almost like a little monster over there, you just got to feed it so it shuts up, like I get it, it's like this so obvious, but you don't want to do it, but you're like, we have to do this just so it's done. But then what I was wondering about, what year was that, would you say, and like what year did you two meet, get together, get married? Is the married a performance or is it real? You know, like, I mean, is that an offensive question even? I don't know. But I mean, because you minted your marriage certificate. So like, I mean, personally, the marriage is an institution. So to use it as a performance piece wouldn't be anything negative to me. I would just be like, that's awesome. But it's a question.
Yeah. Well, we met January 2016. We made Line Scanner, that first piece, in fall of 2016. And then in 2017, we got married. And our marriage, what's interesting, so the marriage certificate piece, which is called Let Me Check with the Wife, is, yeah.
You guys name clever, very clever names.
Yeah, Jesse knows a lot about where that name probably comes from. So I would say what's interesting is the marriage is not a performance. Like, it's not a joke. We're married. Like, when one of us is sick or has surgery or is in a serious need, it's important that we're able to be there for each other in the hospital, be legally, together. So that has real implications. It's real. It's functional. However, I think both of us shared that neither of us was interested in getting married to a man. So it only really became interesting to get married and to inhabit this institution of marriage when it was done in a way that it was kind of not supposed to be done. So I think while it's functional and it's real and it represents like a container of our collaborative life, personal and creative and artistic and everything, there is a little bit of an element of playfulness, just I think that's visible and that we were made aware of by the fact that it wasn't something like we were rushing to get married and like be a man's wife, but we love, and Deja's had great stories like at dinner when men are like, oh yeah, and me and my wife, and then Deja's like, well, me and my wife, like just seeing like the reactions of that is kind of performative in a way. So I think we do play a bit with using it as a way to hold a mirror up to society in some of the ways of like, who has a wife? What does it mean to be a wife and all of that? So there's an element of performance, but it's also a real marriage and relationship.
No, that's great. Yeah, it's just like a subtle subversion in a way, I guess. Like, but like as you said, doing it in a way that it's not supposed to be done. But it's like, who says that though? Even to me, it's like you're not doing it any wrong way. Is there a wrong way to do it? If it's done? Do you know what I mean? Like,
I mean, wrong. I meant wrong as in counter the traditional.
Yeah, and like the subversion, right?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna come back to what you said a little bit ago, Deja, about putting the performer at the center of the experience, because that is I'm still trying to even form this question of because like you definitely put some expectation on the viewer and some pressure almost sometimes on the viewer as a participant, and in those ways it could be taken as like, you guys, I'm sorry to say you guys, is that an issue with you, the word guys, when it's referencing like
not
the gender of it?
Not with me personally, but some people are preferring.
That's why I ask. Like, it's just so reflexive to me, and I catch myself every time and I'm like, stop it, and I just so I'm sorry to stop myself there and ask, but anyways, it's like you guys want to step out of the way, but when I see your work, I see you very much. Like, you guys are making decisions that are very tasteful in ways, making decisions that other people wouldn't. I see a lot of your taste, your personality, and like the minimalism. I mean, there's a very chic nature even to the way that you construct that building, that I saw that in your talk when we were in London. So what can you say about that, would you say? Like, does it make sense what I'm saying at all? Like, because like I totally understand wanting to put the focus on the viewer and responsibility, because then it engages them so that they actually take something away and that they get something out of it. But I can be very like aesthetic purist, where it's like, just take pure, like see God and the divine and just like a visual, So like, where do you guys stand on that within your practice? And like, is there a point where you, like, I know that you go through the process of, okay, what do we want to say and what's the best way to say it? But where within that process is the visual and aesthetic, and is there ever any compromise between the two? Am I making sense, or?
Oh, completely. I just don't know where I want to start. I have about 7 different entry points and many different answers. So I'm just thinking through that. So, you know, are you asking this idea of having the audience as the participant and at the center of the artwork, but how that maybe makes it challenging to control the aesthetics and the output? Is that kind of what you're?
Yeah, to a degree. It's kind of like how much do you put like how much emphasis is there on the viewership and the participatory nature of it, and how does it play into then the visual aspect of it? Because like, I'm trying to get to the point that you guys have a very chic taste that not everybody, like, you could do the projects and try to say the things that you're saying and do it in a different way that would look completely different depending on the person. You know, this is a very broad question, I know, but it's like, I want to understand, or like, just, I'm trying to get to the heart of like, where does your aesthetic nature come from, and where is, because there must come compromise at points between like, okay, I must put my taste in the back for this for a moment so that the message can come forward. Or, do you know what I mean?
I feel like in terms of aesthetic preferences, it's always around like avoiding visual allergies. It's never like that there's a specific aesthetic we're going for, but it's more like, what could absolutely make this horrible? Like, does the performer have a big logo on their pants? You're seeing like Lululemon instead of thinking about what the choreography is. Like, just I feel like everything we're doing is actually just trying to like avoid all things that could wake someone up from the dream or remind them of something normal. And I think somehow what ends up being there is what is left after all the visual allergies have been avoided, and it turns out being kind of, I would say, minimal, but in our minds, we're just like eliminating all potential messages that could conflict with what we're trying to do. It's a similar, the answer to this question kind of feels related to the answer that I give when people ask me if I have tattoos, and I say no, because I use my body as like a messenger, and I don't want to ever have another message on top of the messenger, because it would like give too many signals. And we're always trying to just like really cut to one point, and I think convey one certain kind of feeling. And so we're avoiding anything that might get in the way of that. That's how I answer. I don't know if you
totally understand that.
Agree.
Well, the first thing that came up for me is this idea of that there's 2 parts. There's in an immersive or an interactive installation where the audience is at the center of the piece, or the piece doesn't work without them. Then you need to make sure the piece is going to work. So there's like kind of just like basic, you know, sort of interactive design things that just need to be taken care of, but you don't want it to be noticed, or you don't want that to like steal the show. But then there's the aspect of like, how does this thing look? And, you know, what is like our simple rule set for making decisions? Like, are the walls like plexiglass? Yes. Well, why are they plexiglass? Well, we should be able to see through them. Why? Because we're concerned about like, one-way, two-way mirror, things like this, and surveillance capitalism. What color should they be? They should be black. Why? You know,
because that's the color of a phone screen. You know, it's like everything is really rooted.
Yeah, and so this idea where it's like every decision is made based on like a simple rule set or like a North Star. And also this idea that Anya brought up, which I think drives everything, is that we don't want to wake them up from the dream, so a little logo or the wrong choice can kind of be like ding ding ding, and then they're out of our space, they're out of our hands, and they're no longer in the space with us. So it's like, I think some of the stuff, because it has to be functional, we have to make particular compromises, like this ramp needs to be at this degree and therefore it can't be this other thing we want it to be. But for me, those aren't really compromises, they're just kind of constraints that make the project tighter. And I think you end up having almost an emergent aesthetic. I think we always kind of have an idea, of what we want it to like.
We don't usually talk about the aesthetic of it. It's just like we both already see it. We know what it looks like before it exists. Like we actually don't talk about how it looks.
But I think there's that like general North Star, and then there's also an aesthetic that emerges out of like these just yes, no decisions that we have to make and say yes, no, why are we doing that? Yes, no, and yeah. So
I would say we actually sometimes choose things that are aesthetically not what we wanted because it's conceptually stronger. But I don't think anyone usually knows
exactly
that there might be things that we're like, this would look so cool, but then we're like, but conceptually this other one is like from the region where the book was written, that is what we do with this absurd choice,
but
because it makes more sense.
But that for me is the right choice.
It is the right choice.
I am never upset when I'm like, this is the conceptually strong choice. Like I don't have to convince. If I'm convinced of it and I can get behind that choice, then I'm satisfied, and if I can't get behind it, then that's when trouble happens, and we have to like get to the bottom of it. And if I feel that I can't defend that to myself, then it's not the right choice. But I'm very happy when something turns out to be something aesthetically that I'm like, oh, I might not have gone there right from the beginning, but the series of choices allowed us to emerge to this one place.
Emergent aesthetics. I love that. And so Anya, you touched on exactly why I asked this, like you two, as far as I've heard so far, so I've been on a panel with you. We haven't even mentioned that yet, but like I've been on a panel with you both, and I saw you speak in London on your own roundtable or whatever you want to call the presentation. I think that was like 2 hours long, or am I tripping?
It was like, I think an hour.
An hour?
Hour 15.
Well, yeah, neither of you ever have spoken as Bard Aesthetics. It stood out to me because like I talk about aesthetics a lot and think about aesthetics a lot. So it was very interesting to me, but like the idea of an emergent aesthetic makes a lot of sense. The things that you're speaking about, even Deja, when you mentioned surveillance capitalism, like surveillance capitalist aesthetic is pretty chic, it's pretty cool. Yeah. So like you luck out in those ways, and like phones are designed very aesthetically pleasing. So if you're mimicking the look of a phone, you're in luck. Everything's gonna look great. Totally. And then also, I think the bigger thing for me that I identified with was the like not wanting a logo on something to wake people, not do anything to wake people up from the dream. Like I'm very aware of that as well. Like trying to avoid anything that would like even timestamp anything in a way, like what would date it even. So like even like a trend, try to like avoid any certain, so like,
and also
try to keep things timeless.
Yeah, the one thing that we always say is tech doesn't age well, but concepts do, right? Yeah. So, and part of there's a few reasons why we hide the technology in most of our works, not all of them, but many of them. That's kind of our go-to approach of using technology. And part of that is it doesn't distract the audience participant. They're like, oh, okay, I have to interact with this like thing and wave my hand and jump up and down and it follows me around and things like that. And look, it's interactive, because none of that feels like it's supporting the work. It feels almost like entertainment. So that's one reason. And then also tech ages terribly, and like even more so now because it's moving faster than ever, and it's so exponential that the speed that is that, you know, it makes sense to hide it, you know, because then the piece will age better that way, unless there's a reason to show it, or it's like this, we must at this moment, there's no other way we can do it but have a screen, you know. So okay, in this one instance, we'll you know, make that compromise.
If you sometimes view like the artwork as its own being that has to live its own life, it makes it a lot easier, where because then it's like I'm not even making the decision, it's like it just has to be that way because it's that's what it is. Like what am I supposed to do, like interrupt evolution here, like, you know, like, you know.
I love that.
Like,
what am I supposed to do? The art
yeah.
Art wants to be this way.
I feel that way sometimes, and it's like I think I have to put myself there sometimes because like making decisions to me is like hell a lot of the time. So it's like anything I can do to remove a decision from myself and just put it on something else for whatever, as flimsy as the reason needs to be at it, but you know, I don't care.
Totally. I love it.
So you just touched on something that I saw as a road towards something else, but I know that I wanted to get to like because every time you do a project, you guys said that you decide, you know, what's the best way to represent the idea, and your ideas are very central and you're very conceptual, and like the concepts are very intentional, and that you have messages. Well, maybe not. You might just want to raise questions. You know, I never want to put a message on somebody because sometimes people put message on me and I'm like, no, sorry, I'm not saying anything. Like, I'm just asking stuff. Like, I don't have any answers. So I don't want to put that on you, but like, you definitely have, you know, you're bringing up questions. There's topics, and it's definitely, you know, there's a pursuit behind it. Can you speak just a little bit about that? I don't even mean a little bit. Can you just speak about that? Like, and that I want that to lead into then some of the projects, you know, that you two have worked on. Definitely want to touch on Unsigned and etc. But like to start with just where those concepts that we've been speaking about as the central figure in the work, where the concepts are born, where they come from, you know.
Go, you start.
Well, I'm thinking first about using On View as an example. So the museum commissioned by SCAD Museum of Art in 2019. It's entitled On View. And
Deja, sorry to interrupt, just so that for my reference, that when we're speaking about that piece, you and I spoke about that a little in detail, right? When we were in London. Is that the one?
Yeah, I think so. Cool. Yeah, I think that's the one. And, you know, that project you had mentioned, you know, the chicness of technology and such. And so that is one of the, I think, primary projects we discussed at the Serpentine talk that you went to, or was one of the works that we discussed. And I think you probably saw a lot of imagery of that. And that was a very slick, like the production value was as high as it could get. And that was a choice because we were making it as shiny and user-friendly
aesthetics.
Yeah, it was kind of, we were deciding based on that. We even used like light animation.
Sorry to interrupt, would you say that that's the same exact thing that Apple does?
Yes, it was based like the immersive contract, like that first room of the immersive contract was very much, it was both the feeling of if the contract became a room, how would that feel? How cold would the room be? How embodies it move? Like,
what does a contract feel like? What does the inside of a contract? I love that concept. I mean, to me, it would be like fucking spikes and like being prodded nonstop or something. But yeah, like totally feel you. This is great. Okay, carry on. Sorry.
Yeah, it was that mixed with also the feeling of, you know, getting the brand new iPhone in the white box, and like when you lift it and it's just like fluffy and soft, and you know,
and how
the
they design, even like how the air, like what degree like of
Yes.
speed of air gets let out when you hold the box up, like all of that
all of
is
these,
measured and calculated.
yeah, the fluffy feeling, the different tones of white on top of each other. So literally that
Wow.
room was built around both being inside of a contract and that feeling and how that relates to temperature, performance, body language, but also the lighting design and the user-friendly Apple, like, I'm just here to make your life easier aesthetic.
And also
decided that room.
Yeah, and the whole installation too. I mean, even when you stood to agree to the terms and condition before you entered into the installation, which you already had entered into it. So the second part of the installation, you stood on this pressure sensor. We built subfloors, and everything was like flush. You know, it's like you had crispy, like the lights were like inset, and when you stood in the center, there was like a light animation that everyone knows on Instagram when you're recording a story. And when it completes, it's like, then you can move on. And so we were just playing with these little motifs here and there and using some of this user interface design, you know, the principles of Donald Norman and all the stuff that comes into the Apple, you know, aesthetic, user-friendly design. So anyhow, that project, because I think we got into that kind of rabbit hole. But the reason why I brought OnView up is because, well, why did we come up with OnView, and what was the reason and the concept behind it, and reason why we wanted to, you know, make this our first museum commission. And at the time, because we're experiential artists, there in LA, experiential marketing was just like everywhere. And it was like going crazy with the Museum of Ice Cream and like everyone making infinity rooms. And we're just very confused because we're like, that's you, Kasama's like, what do you mean you're making an infinity room? Like asking people on Craigslist to do this for you. This is crazy. Like, this is someone's artwork. It's not like a concept for your Google installation, you know?
Can I just stop for just 1 second there on that? I think I read something that you two wrote maybe, or something about that, about how the line or like the list or whatever, the waiting list to see that infinity room or whatever that was, or I know like the rain room was one of them, and then there was the light mirror reflection one, but that it was you guys. You were talking about this in your talk, right? About how like the list for those things was just astronomical. You couldn't even go, but it was all just for people to take selfies, and then like nobody cared going to like the rest of the museum or doing anything else. But like whenever it was these opportunities for selfies and Instagrammability and art existing as a backdrop for the self or whatever, like I believe that was what you were talking about in your talk. Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure like we're on the same page here. Very cool. You're thinking about this while you're developing the project.
We're thinking about this, and we're also enraged, right? We're like, but this feels like a co-opting of the rich history of performance installation and happenings and, you know, all, you know, we think of like Black Mountain College and EAT experiments and of art and technology in 1967. We're thinking, you know, the roots of what produced some of these experiential artworks that are then being co-opted to like 24 or 29 rooms and Museum of Ice Cream and all these selfie museums for brands to just connect with and also, you know, participate in surveillance capitalism with. You know, I just think it's, you know, it doesn't feel like the right use of these concepts, and it doesn't feel like it's the right place. And as experiential artists, we were often asked at that time, it started, I think 2017, late 2017, early 2018, where, hey, we have an installation we'd like you to do. Okay, what is it? Well, you know, so first they're going to arrive to this, and then they're going to go to Coachella, and then they're going to do this, and then they arrive to your installation, And, you know, we wanted to have this vibe. You could do whatever you want, but it really just needs to be, I hate to say it, Instagrammable. And so it's like this, every call we got on was like this. And we're
Okay,
just
so you were getting, they wanted to commercialize you. You were getting commercial offers to do, you know, the same as I would an illustration for something.
Yeah.
Like you were getting approached to do your thing for brands. Were they brands asking you to do this?
They were
Jesus
brands.
Christ,
Or
that's
ad
so
agencies.
hilarious. Like performance art has its time. Oh, we gotta.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
really funny. Okay, carry on. Sorry.
Well, I mean, yeah, we thought so too. But then we're like, okay, this is really getting out of control. And this was a topic that we're like, that's not a digital art museum. Like, that's a selfie museum. And there's a difference. And like this idea, like, what's the line between like experiential marketing and selfie museums and digital art
And
museums?
all these art experiences with no artist mentioned. And we're like, if there's no artist mentioned, it's probably not an art experience.
Yeah.
So just like all sorts of that.
So we went on
Nonsense.
it seems like we got really passionate about this. And that was mainly because we were interfacing with it because folks were asking, brands were asking us and agencies were asking us to create these experiences. And I think sometimes we participate in this, you know, works really well. For instance, we did a piece called Off Is On, and we made that in 2018, early, I think March 2018. And this was a fairly large scale installation, but it was part of an Adidas shoe launch, essentially. And the work that they commissioned was truly an artwork. At one point, they did ask if the performers could wear shoes.
The ones that they were launching.
Yes, and we're like, no, we know this is a shoe launch, but it's better for the at the shoe launch, all the performers are barefoot. You know, they won't be wearing any shoes, and they were cool with it because we're like, we don't, you don't want, you're giving a gift to your, you know, to your customers basically, and so they know that they're coming to a shoe launch. Like, we don't also wearing the shoes, you know, we don't need logos. They're going to be like, this was a wonderful experience, and I didn't think about marketing for a second or for 2 minutes, which was the length of the performance. It was like a timed experience, and you know, they were smart and we're like, yeah, like, we're down with that.
But we want this to be art, and we're like, great, because we want to make art. We're aligned.
And it was really successful, and it was a strong piece, so much so that our friend Kieran, she was there, Madame Gandhi, she was there filming, or it was like on IG Live, right? She's like filming, and then the curator of Scat Museum of Art saw her story and then hit us up the next day and DM'd us. It was like, hey, do you want to do a show at Scat Museum of Art?
And that's how we got our first museum commission.
So
that's the inception of On View.
Yeah. And so then,
okay, right on.
Yeah, and so so we held our ground on the Adidas piece, but it was like in that time period when we're so frustrated with this selfie museum culture that we made a piece about it called On View, where it's like asking, are you going to see what's on view? Or are you going to see yourself on view? And so we started there, and then it kind of led into a surveillance capitalism sort of rabbit hole, which we're still in many years later. But
well, I mean, that's a hot topic, certainly. It even sounds cool, you know, like, but I'm so surface level. Like, I think that's what, like, an interesting dynamic in this conversation that I thought was that I can be so surface level when it comes to art, you know, like, so, and you both are so deep, you know.
I wouldn't consider you
not that I don't. What's that?
I wouldn't consider you surface level.
Yeah,
no, and I was about to say I'm very deep as well. I just feel like in different ways, you know, like but I feel like we're aligned so well at the same time. Like your aesthetics and even your messaging, you know, like I align with all of your messages, or your questions that you bring up and everything are very interesting to me as well and make me think, etc. So let's move towards something more recent, like the Unsigned project, if you don't mind. Like, we just dive right in there. I know there's other projects we need to talk about too, but like that one's super fresh because, I mean, it was just yesterday that I purchased Erica's, our mutual friend Erica Zeitweiss. Definitely want to give her a shout out on this. but she was part of the Unsigned project, which I find very cool. That was my second one acquiring. I think it's the coolest thing on Tez right now for sure. So let's that is you two plus Annika. Is that right? I didn't even know that at first. Like I feel terrible, but how did that come about then with Annika involved in that?
This is great. It's such a good story.
She is. I didn't meet her until London, and yeah, she like sought me out, and she made it a very like. So I have her book right here. She made a big point of getting me this book. It was so sweet of her. She was just amazingly sweet. Like one of the like people I met in London. I'm like, man, like just a real pleasure. So, anyways, how did this? What was the inception of Unsigned?
Yeah, so this article came out in The Guardian that was basically talking about men's paintings selling for 10 times more than women's, and that the value of a woman's artwork actually goes down if she signs it, whereas on the contrary, if a man signs his artwork, it goes up in value. And so we were just kind of boiling over this for a couple days. I mean, just the thought of an artist being really proud of making something and then signing their name on it, and that being like a moment of pride or excitement that you're like saying, this belongs to me, I made this, and just identifying with that artwork, and then in that action devaluing the thing that you're signing just like was a gut punch. We're both just like, this is so
in this
fun.
Guardian article, this Guardian article, when did it come out, and like what is it referencing a time in history, obviously, but that is still present today?
Yeah, so this article came out August 3rd.
Really? Of this shit? Just like, okay. Like 20 some days ago. Got it.
Yeah, and the researcher Helen Gorel, who is writing about this, has a book called Women Can't Paint, which is all around basically the subject of inequality in women's art, which is still to this day really quite depressing. But anyway, we were boiling over this. We were all at dinner. We were sitting next to Annika, and we were talking about this article because it had just come out like a few days later. We're like, we really need to, we should start selling the signatures by themselves to like raise their value, like literally raise the value of the signatures. And then she's like, yeah, okay, let's do it. I'm going to tweet about it right now. And I was like, oh shit. So it's kind of like,
well, I have to.
It literally happened.
How do you do such a good impersonation of her? You do a pretty good one as far as
I'm concerned. Right now.
The way that she talks and her presence, or like her mannerisms, are very particular, and I find them extremely endearing. Yeah, so like, cute. I feel you got a couple of the particularities in there that are just like, yeah, this makes me laugh.
No, what were you gonna say?
Oh, I was gonna just elaborate on how spontaneous this was. I mean, it was I think a few days after we had read, or 2 days max, probably, or 2 or 3 days max after we had read the article, and the story goes as Anya has told. And then when Annika is like, let's do this, we're gonna launch tomorrow. We'll be the first four signatures, because Evelyn Benzakova was also there at dinner. I mean, it was actually a Tezos dinner that we were at, and we kind of felt a little bit guilty because we were busy. That this idea came at the beginning of the dinner, and so the whole dinner we were working on the project.
I think we ruined the dinner.
I don't know, but people just watch.
No, you like memorialize the dinner now in history.
So this was like the project coming together, and Annika's like, okay, what are we gonna name it? And so we're like looking through the article, and we're like thinking, we're throwing out ideas, and then Unsigned came, and we're like, okay, we're naming it Unsigned. Annika was going around getting tweets or quotes to like tweet out to like build hype around it, and she wouldn't tell anyone what the project was. She was like, they will steal the concept. I don't trust anyone, and it's like, and that's just like, you have no idea how easy, like these things can be leaked. So they're like, okay. So she was getting quotes from people and wouldn't tell them. She's like, I need a quote. That's why you had quotes from, people saying, I just don't know what to say, and I never know. That's what his quote was.
That's actually really good. Yeah, I mean, like,
that was great.
But it was effective, and so the next day we did our first release, and Kenny Schechter bought one, Kevin Abash, We had some really wonderful collectors.
Fucking Kevin, I saw it. So I saw the day that you launched it, and I clicked on Annika's, and I was like, I didn't know what was happening at all, you know. But I saw Annika's signature. I read the thing on the side. I'm like, huh, and I was like 200 tests. I'm like, okay, you know, that's not outrageous or anything, but it was enough to give me pause and be like, what is this? At least I want to know what I'm buying. And by the fucking time, like, I swear to God, I saw it right when I woke up. I hadn't had any coffee. I have some coffee, and it literally, I'm working on something. And in the back of my head, I'm like, I hear a voice that says, like, you should go buy Annika's signature. And I go to buy it, and fucking Kevin bought it. And I was just like, this motherfucker. But like, I love Kevin because he bought my Tez Genesis. So it's all like, you know, but it's one of those, I remember it so distinctly, just like,
yeah,
it was a frustrating moment, honestly. I was like, fuck, man. And then when I saw he bought it, I was like, I really should have fucking bought it. Like, you know?
Like, that's verification. That would have been a great choice.
Yeah. But yeah, each one went within like 35 seconds to 1 minute. Like, people were calling Annika and being like, is it going to go live? When is it going to go live? When's the first signature going to be available? Like, this kind of thing. And we're like, this is interesting. People are so stoked. I mean, like, part of that is also like Annika's really wonderful with like the public storytelling, and like we had the concept, you know, tight enough, even though it was just 24 hours prior.
This is also, it's hilarious that we worked on a timeline, like, at dinner said we're doing it in the next day release, because Deja and I are very, very detailed, every single thing is so thought out. So like we are like really far away from being like non-precious with our work. Like, we're pretty precious with what we release. Obsessively precious. So
I love to hear that. It makes me feel better.
No, we're very intense. And so it was interesting to be working on this with Annika, who just was also smart enough to know this is a moment in time. Like, this isn't the kind of thing that we could sit and marinate on and spend 3 weeks editing the paragraph about what it is. Like, we need to act now, and we need to like get this, you know,
we literally named it. We came up with a name within 2 minutes.
Yeah.
You know, because she's like, the tweet is ready. What is it called?
The tweet is ready. What is it called?
I just need the name of the piece. And we're like, oh God, you know, but it worked. And like, and I think it's really wonderful because it's just growing in terms of how important this conversation is, not just to us, and it's not just enraging us, but many others, you know, and so it's really interesting because I don't think we've had a project quite like this before. This one is very, very special. So, but yeah, that's the background on Unsigned.
Yeah, from what I know of your work, yeah, it seems like singular within your lexicon, even in just like its pure simplicity.
Yeah.
Would you agree that this is one of those projects that, like you're saying, like, you know, we named it within 24 hours, we released within 24 hours, but everything about it is exactly how it should be. So it's one of those projects that had a life of its own or whatever, and it was just like, we're just fulfilling the needs of this this thing that it was birthed or whatever, because like, even the way, you know, this goes back to the aesthetic thing, and one of the things that brought up the aesthetic question that I had earlier or wanted to bring up was that even when so the first of the Unsigned was Victoria's at Crib, right? And I even wrote her and was like, your signature is just aesthetically, you know, nice even. And like, so the way that you frame it, the distance you give around, you know, it's all exactly just how it should be, in my opinion. It's like, as an OCD person, like, in my mind, there is a right way to do things. In reality, there's not. I understand that intellectually, but like any OCD person understands this struggle, because you're clearly trying to always get something right, you know, even though there's not the right way all the time. But with this, to me, it just looks like this is how it's meant to be. There was no other way to do it. You couldn't have made any other decisions. It couldn't be named anything else. You know, it couldn't look any other way. Like, you couldn't have, the contrast levels between the signatures, like depending on the pressure of the ink, even like that you had to have the contrast levels right. So you guys are leveling out and like, you know, looking at that even, you know, and it's all perfect. That's what I deduced.
Thank you, Jesse.
This is, I feel seen personally. You should come over when we're prepping those signatures.
Oh my God.
You should come over because we received we
Like borderline divorce.
It's like, is this center? And you're like, and we're like, should we embrace that it's actually centered or play into the feel of what the center is? So we usually like land somewhere in between. But also what you're talking about with the contrast. This is, you know, because some of that, it's just a thing because when you're adjusting the levels, you're like, how much am I going to crush this or leave just
I use the same word, fuck.
Yeah, like a little bit of expressiveness, because it's like also each one needs to like punch and they need to be consistent. So it also has to be a choice of how to treat them visually in order for them to all kind of look generally the same. Some have more texture than others. Some of them are like slicker on the edges than others, but you know, they come out to us in a raw format where it's like some of them are like, you can really see the paper behind, and it's like, yeah, so we spend a lot of time looking at these and then centering them and like scaling them and referencing the back catalog as well. So the fact that you're even bringing this up is just,
he's just gonna send you a box of chocolates.
I'll send you a box of chocolate.
No, I mean, when I look at something like that, I feel seen too, you know, like I get it. Like, I love it. I'm wondering, you touched on this, like, what are the instructions that you give the participants in the project when you approach them about it? Do you say like, use a Sharpie of this, you know, dimension and this on white paper only without, you know, hot press so that there's not texture, like, you know what I mean? Like, what instructions are given at the beginning, which is interesting just in general, you know, like publishable even probably in the long run at the instructions to get the concept.
Totally. And there was a lot, we basically, from the night of the dinner when this was decided to when we minted the first ones, we didn't go to bed because there's actually so many decisions. Like, do we say it could be painted? Do we let them choose what color? Some people want to do it in charcoal, other people want to do it. And then, so we went through all of these options of like, how much creative freedom do we want to give each artist to show their signature? Because after all, they're artists. So maybe they want to be expressed in their signature with purple ink, or one of them uses this certain material. Should we let them because it's part of their practice? And then we, in the end, had to just be like, no, because then this is going to become like a creative exercise and it's going to become like them making an artwork out of their signature, which is kind of deflecting from the point, which is just isolating the signature itself. So after hours, literally, of debating like how to approach what the prompt was, we ultimately decided on the parameters of black ink. We didn't specify weight on white paper. And also just because some people have asked, these are not legal signatures. These are more like symbolic signatures or the way that the artist would sign an artwork. So basically the parameters are black ink, white paper, and a 600 DPI scan. And then
600 DPI, I love that. You gotta go big. Like, so, like you gotta have a scanner that goes 600. I'm sorry. Like,
I mean,
some people don't, you know, some people don't.
I mean, they might need to scale. This might be a billboard.
It actually says 600 DPI, higher is better.
Higher is better.
But I didn't want to be too extra. Like my vibe was like 1200 DPI only.
Yeah, no, I was just about to say, like, when I scan at 1200, and for something like this, I would send it at 1200 for sure.
But we were like, okay, some people maybe won't. They're also quick turnarounds. So we're like, what's actually possible, and you know. So, but those are the parameters, and that's why they have this minimal look, because we really wanted to make it about the mark itself and not give too much creative freedom that then like makes the project about something else, you know.
It's perfect. And so you just yesterday, I guess, was week 4. So you're doing one series a week. How many per batch has it been? Is it consistent
12.
or does it change? 12?
12 per week.
The first week was only 4 because we came up with it the night before. So it was myself, Anya, Annika, and the first participating artist, in addition to us, was Evelyn Bensakova, who is a brilliant photographer. So shout out to her. And if you're not familiar with her work, please go check it out. But yes.
And then 12.
The following week was 12.
12.
12, 12, 12. And then next week, 12.
Until we get to 100.
Right now you're at 40.
Yeah.
I love how you know this.
And you're going to get to 100.
Yeah.
Cool. So you got 6 more weeks.
Something like
Cool.
that. I'm not good at math.
All right, cool. I'm going to be watching, of course. But how, like, because I don't want this to get into like any elitist anything or into whatever, but like, what is the selection process for the artists that you're involving? Like, because I know it was you 4 to start, but yesterday I collected, Zeitweiss, a friend of ours or whatever, who's a wonderful tintype photographer who's getting into AI and actually putting like AI onto this old method of, printmaking of tintypes and stuff. It's all super interesting. She's a wonderful person. And I was super stoked to collect her piece, but like, I know that you have connections with her too. So is that a big part of it? Like, who do you already have connections with? Or do you have a bucket list? Are you trying to get Jenny Holzer involved, or are you focusing on Web3? Like, that's kind of the question there. Like, what's your scope of the people involved?
Do you want to answer or do you want me to answer?
Up to you.
Well, I think definitely not limited to Web3. We wanted to also have, because this isn't an issue that's limited to Web3. I also think it could be interesting. There are some, like Evelyn, for example, this is the first time that she's ever been involved in NFT. So this was the first time that she set up her wallet and like was involved in a project and is now like, kind of understanding and seeing it. So I think there's some artists that
one of the first 4 you're saying.
Yeah, Evelyn.
Okay.
And so she had never
first ever blockchain interaction.
Yeah, which I think, and she was like, I'm so happy this was the first one. So we're definitely open to people who have not at all been involved, because it's an issue that's, not limited to Web3. I think our strategy and how we're selecting is artists that are, serious about their practice and their work. Doesn't really matter like what medium, trying to merge people that might be emerging and starting out with also trying to get, which we have coming up in the next few weeks, like some bigger like household name artists. And another decision that we were talking about a lot at the beginning was price. Like, do we want to have some people who are more established be like more expensive for their signature and then others not? And we decided like, no, it doesn't matter if you've like
that would destroy the concept.
I agree.
People would have so many holes to poke at you with, it would destroy the conversation.
Yeah. So we also like this idea of putting everyone on this. It's just about like, you're just valuing like a woman or non-binary artist creative output and authorship. That's what this is about.
Would you say it's not even about the individual in this project? Like, it's not about the individual. It's all the signatures are essentially the same, because the message with everyone is exactly the same.
I would say, yeah.
In a way,
even the secondary market will see it differently. Sorry to interject, but of course. But that's going to be an interesting dynamic as well, right?
It will. I'm sure we'll all witness that once, probably, who knows when, but it'll be, we're also interested to see, how that, how that's interacted with. But like for us, the only important thing is the concept of the work coming through. And like for us, just like we're not trying to show any logos or any, anything that wakes you up from the dream. We design this project in the same way. And so that's why you have like the uniform way of like presenting the signatures, then the uniform pricing, and also pricing it so it's not like crazy, so that like artists, who might not have a lot of TES, can't, buy into the project, which I think is really, really important. So, we tried to design the project in a way where the concept can ring through without having too much cloudiness with other distracting, sort of alarms going off. But I think for me, the criteria is also like really about like the artist being just committed to their practice, like no matter where they are in their career, where it's like, I'm getting up every day and I think about and make art and I'm consumed with it. Like those are the artists who are participating in this, no matter if they've been in Web3 or not, or have been doing this for 25 years or are committed but are like a younger artist. You know, I think for us, that's the most important part. And I think you're right. Like there is character and I would say is certainly brought to the project by who shows up to the project. And so that can't be ignored. And that's really important. But like the idea that we're doing 100 signatures, but like there could be thousands, you know, of these. And so, you know, maybe this is an idea that other people like are also doing like DIY, you know, after. We're stopping it at 100 because that's I think how long it's going to take to make the statement. But yeah.
I would say so far from my perspective that it's not getting clouded up at all with like the people involved. That like what I was thinking while you were speaking was about how any sort of clear directed curation outside of just a seriousness for the practice would be visible over a scope of 100. And it would detract again from the actual message. So like, you know, of course, I'm sure, like, not to put you in a weird position or anything like that, but like, you know, you don't have to fawn over the aesthetics of all the people that you're working with, right? You know, like, so, and I think that's important to the project.
Yeah.
You know?
We actually made a conscious decision to not judge based on whether we're like, this is the art we would do in our home, or like, this artist.
You just set taste aside.
Yeah, like we're just looking like, are they committed to their practice?
Yes.
And for us,
I think
that's the criteria that matters.
If I'm being honest too, like that's research that I did into the project where I went through and like looked at all the people you were working with, saw how many, you know, even how many followers they had, and seeing the range, seeing the different places they are within their career. But what I did see is a seriousness for the practice and like no bullshit really. So like it came through, which is, I think, it's very cool. And it's cool to hear there's going to be 106 more weeks. I can't imagine who these bigger names are that you said, but I'm excited. So I'll be checking. I try not to follow too many people on Object so that I definitely see what I want to see, you know? So like yours or the operator account is one that always I see in the morning. So that's really cool. Can we talk a little bit about the project you did in London? Are you guys okay with time?
Yes.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Can I say one more thing about Unsigned?
Yes, please.
Okay. So another thing that is kind of unintended but amazing about it is we're seeing some people who had their signature collected maybe by like a fan of ours who's like, oh, operator's doing this project and didn't know the artist, but was like, oh, I want to get one. And then now, because they own that artist's signature, are following that artist and like collecting more of their pieces. And so I also think that wasn't like, we didn't have time to even think through that kind of strategy because we literally
that wasn't baked into the concept.
Well, because the concept was like 12 hours old.
Yeah.
We would have done
you
our
couldn't think that far.
We couldn't think that far, but it's been really cool to see because I actually think there's going to be immense ripple effects from people who buy a signature and then are suddenly a fan of that artist and feel invested in their careers and their future and want to buy more of their work. So it's like, in addition to raising the value of, you know, the artist whose signature there is, we're also going to see, hopefully, these artists getting more collectors, more attention, more sales, which is also going to, you know, increase their ability to sustain themselves and thrive and do what they do. So that's been an unexpected and cool outcome too.